There was a box waiting for me on my front porch. No return address. Just my name written in a handwriting I hadn't seen since I burned our wedding photos. Blythe. It wasn't her real name, by the way. Blythe was short for Elizabeth, but she insisted on the nickname because she said it made her sound less like a first lady and more like a jazz singer. Whatever. I hadn't heard from her in over a decade and a half. Not a message, not a sighting, not a rumor through old friends. And now there was this box. It was small, rough wood, no tape, no lock. I took it inside, placed it on the kitchen table, and just stared at it. I didn't open it. Not right away. Inside me, something ancient twisted. That familiar, humiliating ache I thought I buried 15 years ago when she walked out of our home carrying nothing but her passport and a Polaroid of her high school boyfriend. I left it sitting there for hours. By midnight, I couldn't take it anymore. I opened it. Inside were three things: a cassette tape, a manila envelope, and a handwritten note that simply said, "Don't hate me. Just listen. B. I don't even own a cassette player anymore. Who does?" So I drove 30 miles at 2 a.m. to my cousin Jonah's garage. He restores old tech, boomboxes, VHS players, that sort of thing. I told him I needed a tape deck, didn't say why. He handed me one without asking. Back home, I clicked the tape in and hit play. Her voice came through, faint, a little distorted, but still unmistakably hers. "Emery, if you're hearing this, it means I couldn't say it in person. And before you hear what I need to tell you, you should know that none of this was ever meant to stay buried. I just wasn't brave enough." She paused. "I lied about why I left you. I lied about Lucien. I lied about everything. And the worst part? I kept a secret from you that I should have told you 15 years ago." I paused the tape right there. Because I couldn't breathe. Because suddenly I knew. This wasn't going to be an apology. This was going to be a confession. And the manila envelope? It would make me wish I'd never opened that box at all. I didn't open the envelope right away. The cassette tape kept playing in the background, her voice cracking softly through old static, like a ghost trying to reach me through a tunnel that had been sealed for years. "You deserved the truth a long time ago. But I was selfish. And scared. And now, I don't know how much time I have left. So I'm doing this before it's too late." Too late for what? I sat there, the envelope resting under my hand like a live wire. Something about it felt wrong. It wasn't flat like I expected. There was weight to it. Something solid. Something that shifted when I tilted it. My pulse climbed into my throat. I peeled it open. First came a letter, thick parchment, folded twice. But beneath it, something slid out and hit the table with a soft clink. A pendant. No, not just a pendant, a locket. Silver. Tarnished. The clasp barely held together. I picked it up, popped it open, and found two photographs inside. On the left, a baby, maybe 6 months old. Light curls. Wide, unfamiliar eyes. On the right, me. One of those old ID badge photos from when I worked at Darrow Systems in 2007. I remembered the blue polo shirt. The awkward smile. I'd thrown that badge in the trash after Blythe left. So how the hell did she have it? The letter didn't start with "Dear Emery." It didn't even start with a greeting. It began mid-thought, like she'd ripped it out of a longer confession. "He's not who you think he is. I told everyone he was Lucien's. Even Lucien believed it. But he was born in April of 2009. Do the math. We were still married, Emery. I just couldn't face the look you'd give me if I told you he wasn't an accident." I stopped reading. My hands were shaking. 15 years. 15 years of thinking she ran off to be with some musician philosopher wearing silk scarves and drinking herbal tea while they raised a child who had nothing to do with me. And now she was telling me the boy in the photo, the one with my damn chin, was mine? I read the next line out loud, like saying it might make it real. "His name is Caleb. He just turned 15. He's asking questions. I've never told him about you." I stood up so fast the chair tipped backward. My lungs felt like someone was sitting on them. I stared at the locket, the baby's face, the grainy ID photo of myself tucked beside it like some cruel joke. 15 years. Gone. Just gone. No birthdays. No school plays. No scraped knees. No chance to hold him when he cried, or tell him stupid bedtime stories, or teach him how to throw a baseball. She robbed me. And yet, I couldn't even summon rage. Just a hollow, sick kind of sorrow. The cassette was still playing, and I heard her voice tremble. "If you want nothing to do with us, I understand. I really do. But I'm asking you, please, just meet him. Once. He thinks Lucien's his father, but he's starting to notice things. He's asking questions about his blood type, about why his eyes don't match, about why Lucien doesn't like taking him to doctor's appointments. I couldn't move. The room suddenly felt too quiet, too still, like time had hit pause on my entire existence. Then the tape cut to silence. Just like that, it was over. 15 years of silence. 15 years of lies. 15 years of my son being raised by a man who played sitar and told me I lacked emotional range. I should have broken the tape deck, thrown the locket in the trash, cursed her name for every lonely night she left me wondering what I did wrong. But I didn't. Instead, I picked up my keys. Because now, I had to find out the answer to the question I never thought I'd ask. What kind of father am I, 15 years too late? I didn't sleep that night. I tried. I turned the lights off, lay down, and stared at the ceiling while the tape replayed in my head like a looping nightmare. Blythe's voice, the sound of her hesitation, the creak of the cassette winding down. All of it felt like an echo bouncing around a cave I didn't know existed inside me. There's something sick about grief that comes late. You don't know what stage you're supposed to be in. You're not angry at what's happening. You're angry at what already did. And you can't bargain with the past. You can't beg for a do-over when the game ended years ago and you weren't even told the final score. By 6 a.m., I had made two decisions. 1. I needed to see Caleb. 2. I wasn't going to tell Blythe. If she could keep him from me for 15 years, then I had every right to do my own digging now. I wasn't going to knock on the door and politely ask to meet the son I never knew I had. No, I needed to see him with my own eyes first, not the version filtered through her voice or some pre-scripted family reunion. I needed raw, unfiltered truth. And if that meant acting like a stalker for a day, fine. Let her call it what she wants. The envelope had included an address, supposedly Caleb's school, a charter high school in the next county over, 2 hours south. I looked it up online and saw a photo of the staff. Lucien was listed as a guest music instructor. Figures. The guy probably taught kids how to meditate through jazz. I left before the sun came up. The air was still cold, biting at the edges of fall, and the windshield fogged over before I even turned onto the highway. I didn't put on music, just silence. My thoughts were too loud anyway. 2 hours later, I was parked across the street from the school, engine off, hands clenched on the steering wheel. I felt like a criminal, a man who had no right to be where he was. I kept asking myself, what if he doesn't look like me? What if he does? What if he walks right past me and I feel nothing? What if I see myself in him and that's what breaks me? I didn't have to wait long. The bell rang at 3:05 p.m. and kids started pouring out of the double doors like water from a cracked pipe, laughing, shoving, living lives that hadn't yet turned bitter. I scanned the crowd for him, not knowing what I was even looking for. And then, I saw him. Caleb. There was no mistaking it. Same slouch I had in high school. Same tired eyes. He was tall, lanky, awkward in the way teenagers are when their bodies grow too fast and their confidence can't keep up. He wore a baggy hoodie, hands stuffed in the pockets, earbuds in, head low. But the jawline? Mine. The way he kicked a rock down the sidewalk as he walked? Mine. The way he turned to avoid eye contact with a group of louder boys passing by? Absolutely mine. I sat there frozen, watching a living version of my younger self walk right past me, unaware I was even alive. I wanted to open the door, say something, anything, but I couldn't. I choked. Instead, I followed. Yes, I followed him. He walked 2 blocks to a small red brick townhouse, the kind of place you rent when you want to look like you own. He unlocked the door, stepped inside, and was gone. I sat there for 20 more minutes, staring at that house like it owed me something, like it should apologize. Then the door opened again. Lucien walked out. He looked older, still wearing that smug scarf around his neck like it was glued on, but his shoulders weren't as straight. His hairline had betrayed him. And for just a second, I felt better. Because time hadn't just punished me. It had clawed at both of us. He lit a cigarette, took one drag, and then looked up. Right at me. We locked eyes. He knew. Somehow, even from across the street, he knew who I was. He didn't wave. He didn't nod. He just looked at me like I was an expired threat. Then he flicked his cigarette onto the sidewalk, turned around, and went back inside. I sat there for a long time after that. Long enough for the sun to vanish behind the rooftops and for the street lamps to flicker on. And in that moment, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Lucien doesn't want Caleb to know the truth. But I do. I sat with the letter crumpled in one hand and the locket in the other until the sun came up and turned my kitchen into a soft orange prison. The tape had long since gone silent, eaten by the machine. I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten. I had just sat. I kept turning that locket over in my hand like it was a bomb I didn't know how to disarm. Caleb. His name was Caleb. And I had missed 15 birthdays, 15 first days of school, 15 nights of tucking in a kid who apparently didn't even know I was his father. How does a man begin to process that? There was no guidebook for this. No therapist pamphlet titled, "So you just found out you have a teenage son and his mother lied for 15 years. All I had was a weak cup of coffee, a clouded mind, and a decision I couldn't delay. I had to see him. Not talk to him. Not yet. Just see him. My mind wouldn't let me believe he was real until I did. The address Blythe had scrawled in the corner of the envelope was for a high school in a suburban town I'd never heard of, Miller Ridge. One of those places that didn't exist on a map until you zoomed in 3 times. I looked it up online. Charter school. Modern. Small class sizes. Probably full of kids with parents who read parenting blogs and debated sugar limits at PTA meetings. Definitely not the kind of place I could picture myself ever fitting in. Still, I drove. I didn't tell Blythe. I didn't reply to the note. I wasn't ready to hear whatever follow-up spin she had prepared. No explanation would soften the blow of what she'd done, and I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of controlling how I stepped into this mess. If I was going to meet my son, or at least look him in the eye, I needed to do it my way. The parking lot across from the school was nearly full when I arrived. It was just past 3 o'clock. Kids were starting to pour out in clusters, backpacks slung over shoulders, earbuds jammed in, laughter echoing like I was watching a world I no longer belonged to. I scanned faces, my eyes jumping between groups, trying to find some flicker of familiarity. Then I saw him. He walked alone, head down, hood up, kicking a bottle cap across the sidewalk like it owed him money. Tall, lanky, a little awkward in his step like he hadn't figured out how to fit into his own body yet. But it was him. Even if I hadn't known his name, I would have known. There was a tension in his shoulders I'd seen in the mirror every morning of my own teenage years. He had my eyes. Not the color, the shape. That slightly narrowed, cautious squint, like the world had burned him once and he wasn't in the mood for a repeat. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just watched as he walked 3 blocks to a red brick townhouse with a small metal gate and an overgrown garden. The kind of place that looked picture-perfect in spring but haunted in the fall. He walked inside without looking around, like he knew no one would ever be watching. But I was. And 20 minutes later, so was Lucien. He stepped out of the house like a man checking for trespassers, slow, measured, scanning the street like it owed him an apology. His hair was shorter now, more gray than black. His jaw had softened, and his neck scarf. Yes, he still wore the damn thing. Looked more like a costume than a fashion statement. But his eyes hadn't changed. Still smug. Still rehearsed. And when he spotted me sitting in my car across the road, our eyes locked like magnets repelling. He didn't wave. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He knew who I was. And the way he stared at me, not with surprise, but with recognition and contempt, made one thing clear. He'd been waiting for this day to come. He flicked his cigarette to the sidewalk and walked back into the house without a word. I sat there until the streetlights came on, until the sky turned black and the houses swallowed their windows in warm yellow light. I watched that door like it might breathe. I wanted Caleb to come back out. I wanted to see him again. Maybe just one more look. Maybe a sign. He didn't come back out. But Lucien had already told me everything I needed to know with his silence. He'd known about me this whole time. He'd let that kid grow up believing a lie. And now that I was back, he was going to do everything in his power to bury it. But I wasn't leaving. I wasn't backing down. Because for the first time in 15 years, I had something I hadn't felt since Blythe left. Purpose. I didn't go back home that night. I drove around for hours, circling Miller Ridge like a hawk too afraid to land. I parked outside the all-night diner on Westfield Road, ordered 2 cups of black coffee and a slice of pie I didn't touch, and stared at a stained napkin while trying to write something that didn't sound unhinged. The napkin was supposed to be a note for Caleb. Just a few words. Something small. Something that wouldn't terrify him, wouldn't ruin his world overnight, but would plant a seed of curiosity. I figured if I could just leave it in the mailbox, nothing dramatic, nothing confrontational, Maybe he'd read it in secret. Maybe he'd start asking questions. Maybe he'd even want to meet me before Lucien or Blythe got a chance to poison the well again. But the truth is, no matter how many times I rewrote it, every version sounded insane. My name is Emery. I think I'm your biological father. Crumpled. Tossed. You deserve to know the truth about where you come from. Too dramatic. Gone. I know this will sound strange, but I've been watching you. God, no. That sounded like a court order waiting to happen. Eventually, I settled on this. Caleb, I knew your mom a long time ago. We were married. There are things you may not have been told. If you ever want to know more, I'm ready when you are. My number's below. No pressure. Emery. Simple. Neutral. Human. I slipped it into a plain envelope and drove back to the townhouse just after 6 a.m. The sun hadn't fully risen, and the street was still quiet. Lights off. Mail hadn't been picked up yet. I parked 2 blocks away, walked down the sidewalk, pulled my cap low, and dropped the envelope in their box like I was delivering a pizza menu. I didn't wait. I didn't look back. I felt something. Not peace exactly. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. Then, 3 hours later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. No caller ID. No voicemail. Just a single ring and silence. Then a text followed. One sentence. Stay away from my family. No name. But I didn't need one. It wasn't Lucien. He'd be too proud to text like a coward. And it sure as hell wasn't Caleb. The number was out of state, Oregon. And that's when my stomach sank. Because I remembered, vaguely, Blythe had once mentioned her sister moved to Portland. They were close. Shared everything. Which meant one thing. Blythe had found the note. And she wasn't just watching. She had backup. Now it wasn't just about Caleb anymore. It was a wall being built. Fast, wide, and reinforced by every person who ever helped her keep the truth from me. I stared at the text for 10 minutes before replying. He's not your family. He's mine, too. No response. And just like that, my plan to ease into his life turned into something else. A game of chess where every piece I moved was being countered by people who had a 15-year head start. But I wasn't going to fold. That afternoon, I drove to the school again. I waited in the same spot across the street. And when the last bell rang, I didn't just watch Caleb walk home. I got out of the car and followed him on foot. I kept my distance. Close enough to see him clearly, far enough not to scare him. And halfway down the block, I watched him stop, pull something from his backpack, a white envelope. My envelope. He opened it, and he read it. I stopped breathing. He didn't react right away. He didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't tear it up. He just stood still, reading it once, then again, then folding it back up slowly and sliding it into his pocket like it was something he wasn't supposed to have. Then, he turned around and looked straight at me. Not confusion, not anger, just quiet, cold awareness. I froze. For a second, I thought he might walk up to me, ask something, say anything. But he didn't. He turned and ran. Straight home. And I knew, without a doubt, what was coming next. For the next 2 days, I waited. I didn't call Blythe. I didn't show up at the school again. I didn't even leave the house. I sat in my kitchen, drinking lukewarm coffee, listening to the wind beat against the old siding of my rental like it wanted to remind me that time doesn't wait for the emotionally damaged. I kept my phone on loud, volume maxed, like I was expecting a call from the president. Every buzz made me flinch. Every silence felt like a punishment. I thought maybe Caleb would reach out. Maybe he'd want to talk, yell, demand the truth straight from me. Maybe he'd ask me if it was real. Or maybe he'd show up at my door, fists clenched, and tell me to stay the hell away from his life. Either way, at least I'd know where I stood. But nothing came. No texts. No calls. Just silence. Again. Until the third night. It was after 11. I had dozed off on the couch, wrapped in the kind of blanket you only keep because you're too cheap to throw it out. The knock was sharp. Precise. Not the kind of knock someone makes when they're nervous or unsure. It was the kind you make when you own the conversation before it begins. I opened the door, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. It wasn't Caleb. It was Lucien, standing there in that same ridiculous scarf, though now it hung a little more limp around his neck. His face was pale, hollow. There were deep lines around his mouth I hadn't noticed before. And his right hand, it was clenched around a manila folder like it was keeping him alive. We didn't say anything at first. He just walked past me without asking, straight into my living room, like he had been here before. I didn't stop him. I just closed the door behind him and followed, stunned into silence. He stood in the middle of the room, looking at the photos on my shelf, old pictures of my parents, my brother who I haven't seen in years, even one of me as a teenager next to a Chevy I rebuilt. Lucien looked at that photo longer than the others. I wondered if he saw the resemblance. Then he turned to me and tossed the folder onto my coffee table. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "I'm here to end this before you blow everything up." His voice was tired, not angry, resigned, like a man who already lost something, but didn't want to lose more. I didn't touch the folder. I just asked, "How long have you known?" He didn't flinch. "Since he was 5, maybe 6. Blythe slipped once during an argument. She said something about how he got my stubbornness from someone else. I asked questions. She cried. Then she told me it didn't matter because I was the only father he'd ever know. And you just went along with it?" I said, my voice colder than I expected. "You let me disappear from his life without saying a word." Lucien didn't defend himself. He sat down slowly, like he didn't have the strength to stand anymore. "You don't know what it was like. He was my son in every way that counted. I raised him. I cleaned his scraped knees. I taught him how to ride a bike. I was there for every fever, every nightmare, every school play. And I loved him. Still do." I stared at him, jaw tight. "That doesn't make you his father." "No," he said, looking straight at me. "But it also doesn't make you one." That hit harder than it should have. Because in some small, disgusting way, I knew he was right. I had biology, DNA, a face that mirrored the kids. But I didn't have time. I didn't have the years. I had nothing but a letter, a locket, and a voice on a cassette tape. And a wound so deep it didn't bleed anymore. It just ached. He leaned forward, opened the folder, and slid a few pages toward me. "These are his medical records. School reports. Photos." I thought, maybe if I showed you what you missed, you'd understand why you don't get to come barging in now like you're owed something. I didn't touch the papers. I didn't need to. Because the second photo on top was Caleb at age 10, missing teeth, beaming proudly while holding up a school science trophy. And standing behind him, smiling like a man who had earned that moment, Lucien. I felt sick. He watched me, eyes steady. "You think you're doing the noble thing by showing up now. But all you're doing is tearing open something we spent years trying to protect. Caleb has questions, yeah, and he deserves answers. But if you answer them recklessly, you don't just ruin Blythe. You ruin him." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him and shake him and demand why no one had thought I mattered in this. Why no one had considered that maybe the man who lost everything 15 years ago didn't just evaporate. But instead, I asked, "Does he know? About me?" Lucien hesitated. For the first time all night, his eyes dropped. "He suspects," he said quietly. "And Blythe, she's slipping. Her health isn't what it used to be." I froze. "What do you mean?" Lucien stood up, slowly, like he'd said too much already. "Ask her yourself. But if you're going to do this, Emery, do it the right way. Don't make him choose between the man who raised him and the stranger who showed up with a guilt complex and a decade of silence." Then he left. No goodbye, no threat, just silence, and the echo of a door clicking shut. I sat there for hours afterward, staring at the photo, at the boy I didn't raise, and the man who did. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I asked myself a question I didn't want to hear the answer to. What if I'm not the hero in this story? I didn't sleep after Lucien left. I didn't move. The manila folder was still on my coffee table, its mouth gaping open like it had more to say, more memories to shove down my throat. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. I just sat there in the dark. The image of Lucien's face burned into the back of my eyes. Not gloating, not smug, but worn, exhausted, like he'd spent years fighting a silent war and had nothing left to offer except the wreckage. But he'd said something I couldn't ignore, something that started circling in my brain like a vulture that smelled the end of something. Her health isn't what it used to be. I wasn't sure if it was a warning or a guilt trip. Maybe both. But either way, it stuck. I needed to see her. I'd avoided it long enough. I had seen my son. I'd confronted the man who raised him. Now it was her turn. She owed me more than a voicemail and a cassette tape. I drove to the address I had from the envelope, a small apartment complex on the edge of town. The kind built during a time when modern, mint beige walls and water stains on the ceiling. I didn't call ahead. I didn't knock with caution. I used the side entrance, climbed the stairs, and walked straight up to Unit 3B, fueled by 2 decades of questions I didn't get to ask when she vanished. When the door opened, I nearly didn't recognize her. Blythe had aged, but not in the way most people do. She looked like someone who had spent years wearing heavy coats in summer, dragging invisible baggage through every room she entered. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, more silver than blonde now. Her skin was pale, her collarbones sharper than they used to be, like her body had started shrinking around her secrets. She didn't look surprised to see me. She just stepped aside and said, "Come in," before the neighbors see. Her apartment was clean. Not cozy, not lived in, just clean. Minimal. A single framed photo on the mantel. Caleb, maybe 9 years old, holding a model airplane. No photos of her. No sign of Lucien. Just the boy, again and again. She sat down slowly on a beige love seat, the kind you buy in a rush when you move somewhere you don't plan to stay long. I stayed standing. "I got your note," she said quietly. Or rather, Caleb did. I told myself I was going to intercept it, but he got to the mailbox first. "Then you've read it?" She nodded. He didn't talk to me for 2 days. Just walked around like a ghost, wouldn't even eat. Finally, he asked me straight up, "Is Emery my real dad?" I didn't lie. The words hit me like a slap. I didn't lie. That was rich, coming from the woman who'd buried 15 years of my life under silence. I walked toward her, slow, careful, like she might break. "Why, Blythe? Why did you do it like this? You could have told me. You could have said something before you left. Before Lucien. Before all of it." She rubbed her hands together like she was cold, but the heat was on full blast. "Because I was scared. You were already slipping away from me, Emery. You just didn't know it. You work nights. You never looked me in the eyes anymore. And when I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. I didn't want to trap you into a marriage that was already fraying. You didn't trap me. You took him from me," I said, my voice sharper now, chest burning. "You made the decision for both of us." She looked up, and for the first time, her voice cracked. "I thought I was doing what was best. I thought Lucien could give him more than you could. More time. More attention. And he did. He was a good father. He is." I shook my head. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to erase me because I worked night shifts to pay for your studio and your little road trips to Vermont. I was tired, not absent." Silence. A long one. She reached for something under the couch, a small pill bottle. Shook it once, but it was nearly empty. "What's that?" I asked, though I already had a feeling. "Immunosuppressants," she said softly. "Lupus. Diagnosed 2 years ago. It's aggressive." My throat tightened. "I didn't tell Caleb," she continued. "Not everything. Not yet. He knows I've been tired. That I've been having trouble keeping food down. But he doesn't know about the damage. The kidney problems. The flares. He still thinks I'm just getting older." I sat down finally, not because I wanted to, but because my legs couldn't hold the weight anymore. "That's why you contacted me," I muttered. "Not because you had a change of heart. Because you're dying." "I don't know if I am," she whispered. "But I had to plan for the worst. He doesn't have any other family. Lucien and we split a year ago. He couldn't handle the stress. He loves Caleb, but he's not built for full custody. Not for hospitals and emergency calls at 3 a.m. You're all he has left." My heart twisted, a strange, cruel knot of resentment and responsibility. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be dragged back into a life I wasn't allowed to raise. I didn't ask to become a father to a teenager who didn't know me, didn't trust me, and might never forgive me. But I was all he had left. And the worst part? I still wanted the chance. I waited 3 more days before I heard from Caleb again. 3 days of second-guessing every moment I'd spent watching from a distance. 3 days of wondering whether the truth had made things better or burned it all to ash. I didn't reach out. I didn't push. He was the one who deserved space now. The message came on a Thursday night, just after I'd come back from the grocery store. I was unpacking a frozen pizza and an off-brand bottle of root beer when my phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. The text read, "I don't know what you want from me, but I'm free tomorrow after school." That was it. No greeting. No name. Just that single, heavy line. I replied, "Let's get food. You pick the place." He didn't answer right away. I assumed he'd ghost me again. But at 2:41 a.m., I got a reply. "There's a place called Sherman's. I go there when I skip class sometimes." The honesty hit harder than I expected. Friday, I was waiting in the corner booth at Sherman's Diner 20 minutes early. It was a quiet place. Linoleum floors, yellowed menus, jukebox that hadn't worked since the Bush administration. I ordered coffee and tried to look casual, but my hands kept fidgeting. I had rehearsed a dozen versions of what I'd say. None of them felt right. Then he walked in. Same hoodie, same headphones around his neck. But this time, his eyes didn't scan the room nervously. He walked right up, dropped into the seat across from me, and said, "You're taller than I thought you'd be." I smiled cautiously. "You're quieter than I expected." He didn't laugh, but he didn't leave, either. We sat in silence for a while. I didn't rush it. I let the moment breathe. Finally, he looked up. I read the note like 10 times. Thought it was fake. Thought maybe Lucien was messing with me. But then I saw a picture of you when you were my age, in Mom's photo box. You looked like me. "I am you," I said softly. "At least part of you." He chewed on that, then looked out the window. "Mom says you didn't know, that she kept it from you." "She did," I said. "But that doesn't mean I get a free pass." He nodded slowly. "So what now? You want to, be my dad or something?" I took a breath. This was the line I had to get right. I don't want to replace anyone. I don't want to take something that's not mine. But I do want a chance to know you. As much or as little as you'll allow. He looked at me for a long time. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw a softness behind the caution. A flicker of something that looked suspiciously like hope. "You like baseball?" he asked. I blinked. "Yeah, I used to." He pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. "I pitch for the junior varsity team. Games next week. You could come, if you want." I didn't hesitate. "I'll be there." He nodded, almost like he didn't want to smile, but couldn't help it. "Don't embarrass me." No promises. A week later, I sat in the bleachers of a dusty high school field, watching a kid who carried half my face strike out a batter with more force than I'd expected. He didn't look up at me, not right away. But in the third inning, when he walked back to the dugout, he gave the smallest nod. And I knew, in that tiny motion, everything had changed. 2 months later, we were having lunch once a week. Then it was weekends. Then he asked me to teach him how to change his oil. The first time he called me Dad, it slipped out by accident. He apologized immediately. I told him never to apologize for that. Blythe's condition worsened, but she fought hard. We talked sometimes, not like before, but not as enemies either. More like co-authors of a messy story neither of us knew how to end properly. She thanked me once, quietly, for showing up. I told her I wasn't doing it for her. And I wasn't. I was doing it for the boy who finally knew who he was. And for the man who finally got the chance to become who he should have been all along.